In the darkness between worlds, where no light has ever touched and silence weighs heavier than stone, there exists a document so terrible that speaking its name aloud can summon the attention of things that hunger for human souls. Before the first human drew breath, a war tore through the fabric of creation itself, and the victors wrote their account in fire that burns forever but consumes nothing, in words that sear the mind of anyone foolish enough to read them. They call it the Scroll of Heaven's Fire, and it is the most dangerous manuscript in existence. But before we step into this abyss, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the mysteries that history tried to bury. Turn on notifications, because what we uncover in the shadows deserves to be seen. Now, let us begin our descent into the fire. Welcome, seekers of hidden truth. Today, we speak of angels at war and the scroll that remembers everything. Chapter 1, the scroll that burns without consuming. In the oldest libraries of human memory, in texts that predate the common Bible by centuries, whispers speak of a document that exists beyond the normal laws of matter and time. The Scroll of Heaven's Fire appears in the margins of apocryphal writings, referenced in the Book of Enoch, hinted at in the Wars of the Sons of Light, and encoded in the mystical traditions of Merkaba literature. But unlike other ancient manuscripts that crumble with age or fade into dust, this scroll cannot be destroyed because it was never made of earthly materials. According to the first book of Enoch, when the rebellion in heaven reached its terrible climax, the archangel who led the loyal host commanded that a record be made of everything that transpired. But no ordinary parchment could contain such knowledge. No human language possessed words powerful enough to capture the true names of the fallen, the locations of their chains, and the strategies employed in celestial warfare. So the record was written in the language of creation itself, inscribed in flames that draw their fuel from the fabric of reality. The scroll burns eternally, its letters formed from fire that has no source and needs no tinder. Ancient Kabbalistic texts describe it as existing simultaneously in multiple realms, visible to angels, and accessible only to those humans who have somehow survived encounters with divine power. The flames dance across its surface, forming words in Hebrew, Aramaic, and languages that have no human names, languages spoken before the Tower of Babel divided human tongues. Jewish mystical tradition, particularly in the Hekhalot literature from the first centuries after Christ, speaks of ascended masters who claim to have glimpsed the scroll during visionary journeys through the seven heavens. These mystics describe it as hanging in the throne room of the divine, suspended in air by its own burning, surrounded by 4 living creatures who guard it day and night. The creatures possess countless eyes that never blink, watching anyone who approaches with an intensity that strips away flesh and pretense until only the naked soul remains. The scroll's purpose extends beyond mere historical record. It serves as both archive and weapon, containing not just what happened during the war in heaven, but strategic information that could be used in conflicts yet to come. The Testament of Solomon, a text from the 1st to 3rd centuries, hints that King Solomon's legendary power over demons derived from his temporary access to portions of this scroll, knowledge he used to bind 72 infernal princes and compel them to build his temple. But the scroll contains something even more dangerous than the names of fallen angels. It holds the actual sequence of events that led to the rebellion, the grievances and accusations that split the heavenly host, and the philosophical questions that first gave birth to doubt in paradise. To read these sections is to understand the logic of the fall, to see through the eyes of those who chose darkness, and such understanding has driven more than one seeker into irreversible madness. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the caves of Qumran, make oblique references to a war scroll that describes conflict between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. Some suggest the Qumran community possessed fragments of knowledge derived from the original scroll of Heaven's Fire, information that made them flee into the desert to guard what they had learned. Early Christian writings also reference this burning record. The Apocalypse of Peter describes a vision in which the apostle sees books in heaven, including one surrounded by flames that contains the names and punishments of every angel who fell. The book of Revelation mentions a scroll sealed with 7 seals, that only one being in all creation proves worthy to open. The flames that form the scroll's text reportedly respond to the reader, showing different information to different seekers based on what they can endure. A righteous person approaching it might see only names and dates, historical facts about the war. But someone harboring darkness in their heart would see different words entirely, instructions that seem helpful, but ultimately lead to destruction. The scroll itself becomes a test, separating those who seek truth from those who seek dominion. The scroll's physical characteristics defy comprehension. It measures approximately 3 cubits when rolled, yet when opened, it extends infinitely, its length depending on how much knowledge the reader can withstand. The flames never produce smoke, never dim, never flicker. Touch it, and the fire does not burn flesh immediately, but instead burns away lies, illusions, and self-deception, which for most humans proves more painful than physical fire could ever be. Chapter 2, the first war in heaven. Before humans took their first breath, the heavens witnessed violence that would echo through all subsequent ages. The war between angels began not with weapons, but with words, with questions that should never have been asked, and accusations that could never be unsaid. Lucifer, whose name meant bearer of light, stood among the highest of all created beings. The book of Ezekiel describes him as the anointed cherub who walked among stones of fire, perfect in beauty, covered in precious stones. Isaiah calls him the morning star, son of the dawn, who said in his heart that he would ascend to heaven and make himself like the Most High. But what actually ignited the rebellion? The Life of Adam and Eve, an apocryphal work from the 1st century, claims the conflict began when the angels were commanded to bow before newly created humanity, made in the divine image. Lucifer refused, arguing that beings of fire and spirit should not bow to creatures made from clay and dust. The refusal spread like infection through the angelic host. According to the Book of Enoch, 1/3 of heaven's angels sided with Lucifer. These were not minor angels. Among them were princes and powers, angels who had governed stars and seasons, who had sung at creation's birth, who had stood in the presence of the divine throne since before time had meaning. The loyal angels, led by Michael the archangel, stood firm. Michael, whose name means who is like the divine, became the chief warrior of heaven, commanding the armies of light against the rebellion. The book of Revelation describes the conflict. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. But what did warfare in heaven actually look like? Angels are not flesh and blood. They wield no swords of metal, shoot no arrows of wood. Their weapons are light itself, concentrated will, and the raw power of their celestial nature. The book of Enoch describes lightning bolts that tear through spiritual substance, flames that burn not flesh but essence, words of power that can unmake the bonds holding an angel's form together. The Ascension of Isaiah provides a glimpse into the conflict's intensity. It describes how the fighting shook the foundations of heaven, how the crystalline firmament cracked under the force of angelic combat, how the morning stars that had sung together at creation now screamed as they were torn apart by civil war. The hierarchy of angels became a hierarchy of battlefields. The seraphim, burning with holiness, clashed with their former brothers in the highest heaven. The cherubim fought to prevent the rebels from reaching the throne room. In every realm, angels who had loved each other for eons beyond counting now sought each other's destruction. Lucifer's rebellion employed deception as much as force. The Testament of Solomon describes how the fallen prince sowed doubt among the loyal angels, questioning whether their obedience was slavery, whether freedom meant anything if one could not choose to refuse. These philosophical weapons wounded as deeply as any spear of light. The turning point came when Michael invoked the true name of the divine, a name that contains power beyond comprehension. When Michael spoke it, the rebels suddenly saw themselves as they truly were, not liberators, but betrayers, not seekers of justice, but architects of destruction. The defeat was total and devastating. Revelation describes the dragon being hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. The book of Enoch describes how the fallen were bound in chains of darkness, cast into pits of fire, imprisoned in the earth itself to await final judgment. Some fell to earth. Others fell to places between earth and heaven, inhabiting the air, the spaces between spaces. 2 Peter speaks of angels who sinned being cast down to Tartarus, a Greek term for the deepest abyss. Jude mentions angels who did not keep their positions of authority, kept in darkness and bound with everlasting chains for judgment. Chapter 3. Secrets written in flame. The content inscribed in the scroll of heaven's fire goes far beyond mere historical record. According to ancient mystical traditions, the scroll contains 7 categories of knowledge, each more dangerous than the last. The first category consists of the true names. In ancient understanding, names held power over the entities they described. The scroll reportedly contains the complete roster of fallen angels, not the few dozen names preserved in texts like Enoch, but thousands, perhaps the full third of heaven's host that fell with Lucifer. Each name appears in its original celestial form, and to speak these names correctly is to potentially summon the being or command it. The book of Enoch provides a glimpse of this roster, naming leaders like Semyaza, Azazel, Armoros, Barakel, and Kokabil. But these are described as only the chiefs. Beneath them serve countless others whose names were lost to human records but remain burned into the scroll. The second category involves the Watchers and their forbidden teaching. The book of Enoch describes how angels, seeing the beauty of human women, descended to earth and took them as wives. But they also taught humanity what should have remained hidden: metalworking and weapon making, astrology and divination, herbalism and potions, and the movements of celestial bodies. The scroll allegedly records the specific techniques themselves. It contains the actual spells and formulas that angels taught to antediluvian humanity, knowledge so powerful that the flood was sent partly to erase it from the earth. The third category encompasses battle strategies of celestial warfare. Michael's angels won through superior strategy, tactics that exploited weaknesses in the rebel formations. The scroll contains these strategies, information that could theoretically be used in spiritual warfare even now. The fourth category holds the 7 seals of binding. The Testament of Solomon describes how the king received a special ring bearing a seal that gave him power over all demons. The scroll reportedly contains the master versions of these seals, the original patterns from which all other protective seals derive. The fifth category contains prophecies of future conflicts. The book of Revelation speaks of a final battle at Armageddon. The scroll allegedly contains details about this future conflict: participants, locations, timing, and outcomes. The sixth category involves the philosophical arguments that initiated the rebellion. The scroll records not just that Lucifer rebelled, but why. It preserves his logic, his grievances, his case against the divine order. To read this section is to understand the perspective of the fallen, and such understanding has destroyed minds. Early church fathers wrote warnings about texts that contained the wisdom of the serpent, arguments so seductive that even faithful believers could be led astray. The Gnostic Gospels contained elements of this perspective. The idea that the Creator was flawed, that matter was a prison, that liberation required rebellion. The seventh category contains the true location and nature of the fallen angels' current imprisonment. Where exactly is the abyss? What are the chains that bind Lucifer? The scroll allegedly provides specific answers, actual locations in the spiritual geography of reality, and most dangerously, how the seals maintaining them might be broken. The book of Enoch describes chambers in the earth where fallen angels await judgment, places where they scream in torment. The scroll would provide coordinates to these locations and potentially methods for accessing or releasing what lies within. Chapter 4. The price of forbidden knowledge. Throughout history, scattered accounts speak of those who sought the scroll of heaven's fire. None of these stories end well. The book of Enoch itself serves as a warning. Enoch walked with the divine and was taken up to heaven without experiencing death. During his celestial journey, he witnessed the places of judgment, the prisons of the fallen, and the secrets of heaven and earth. But the knowledge he gained carried a terrible weight. His book was excluded from most biblical canons because the truths it contained were deemed too dangerous. Jewish mystical tradition speaks of 4 rabbis who entered the Pardes, the mystical garden of deep biblical interpretation. Of the 4, only one emerged intact. Ben Azai looked and died. Ben Zoma looked and went mad. Elisha ben Abuya looked and became a heretic. Only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and departed in peace. The tradition suggests that what destroyed the others was exposure to knowledge their minds could not contain. Medieval grimoires often claim descent from angelic sources. The Key of Solomon, the Sworn Book of Honorius, the Book of Abramelin, all present themselves as containing secrets taught by angels. But practitioners paid horrific prices. One chilling account comes from the medieval period. A monk claimed to have discovered a method of mystical ascent that would allow him to view the celestial archives. He prepared through months of fasting and prayer. On the appointed night, witnesses reported seeing light blazing from his cell and hearing him crying out in unknown languages. By morning, they found him alive, but transformed. He had aged decades overnight. His hair turned white, his eyes vacant. For the remaining years of his life, he sat in silence, occasionally writing fragments that describe battles between beings of light and darkness. The Council of Toledo in 647 condemned certain books of magic that supposedly granted power over angels and demons. Anyone possessing these books faced excommunication, and the books were burned. Yet the condemnations grew more frequent over following centuries, suggesting new seekers continued to emerge. The grimoire tradition claims that certain spirits can provide access to forbidden knowledge. The Lesser Key of Solomon contains instructions for summoning 72 demons, each capable of teaching specific information. But the text emphasizes the dangers. The spirits lie, seek to break free from binding, and tempt the summoner with power while gradually corrupting them. The scroll's physical location remains unknown. Some traditions place it in the highest heaven, inaccessible except through death or mystical ascent. Others suggest it exists simultaneously in multiple planes of reality. Still others propose that fragments of its knowledge have leaked into the world, scattered among grimoires and mystical texts. A few interpreters suggest the scroll is not meant to be read at all. Its fire burns as a warning, a test that no human is meant to pass. Perhaps some knowledge serves better as prohibition than possession, that some questions deserve no answers, that the boundary between human and divine exists for our protection. So now you know the secrets of the Scroll of Heaven's fire, the war between angels, and the terrible price of forbidden knowledge. Would you seek the scroll if given the chance? Would you endure the fire for the truth it contains? Or would you turn away, accepting that some mysteries exist to remind us of our limits? Remember that the angels still watch. The war still rages in realms beyond sight, and the scroll still burns with secrets that could illuminate or destroy anyone bold enough to read them. Thank you for descending into this darkness with us. If you found this journey compelling, subscribe to our channel for more explorations of the mysteries that lurk at the edges of the known world. Until next time, may you walk safely between the light and the dark.